I think it's time to finally talk about Kaladin and where his arc is going. And to do that, we have to talk about where he's been and his whole plotline as a whole. Because we're talking about a character's full arc that I think will be ending in book 5, I do need spoilers for the entire Stormlight Archive. I will eventually be getting into spoilers for Wind and Truth, but I think my theory is pretty fully fleshed out before that. So if you haven't read the preview chapters, you are pretty safe to stick around. I will warn you before I get to that information. So stick around and see if you think that what I say holds merit before that. So first of all, let's talk about where Kaladin has started off his journey. He starts off as a child who struggles with depression, and he leans heavily on his brother to help him pull out of his depression as needed. And Kaladin does that repeatedly throughout his story. In The Way of Kings, we see him at the Honor Chasm, ready to end it all because life has been so terrible and gotten so terrible again, and Syl comes up and saves him at the last minute. She comes up with the leaf that he could use to end his life, and he realizes that maybe there are things to live for. Maybe I can live for Bridge 4. Maybe I can live for protecting and saving them. And again, this is Kaladin using external sources to find things to live for. In the same book, in The Way of Kings, Kaladin has this first interaction with Wit, or Hoid, where they get the story of Fleet. And Hoid is telling him the story, and Kaladin's like, is this story about me? And Wit's like, I'm not going to tell you the meaning of the story. Whatever meaning you take from it is about you. And we know that Kaladin is a windrunner, and maybe it's representative of his powers and him riding the storms. But if you also look at it, it's about somebody who's struggling to stay ahead of what could metaphorically be called the storm of life, and barely keeping ahead of it. And then eventually the storm does catch up to him because he has nowhere further to run. And really interestingly, that story ends in Shinovar, which we know where Kaladin is going in Wind and Truth. Without even being a spoiler for Wind and Truth, we knew that ahead of time, that Kaladin and Szeth will be going on a journey to Shinovar during this book. And if you've watched my theory video on the Shard of Honor, you know that I think Kaladin is going to be the one to pick up the Shard of Honor when it gets reforged. A huge hint of that is that the Stormfather calls him the Son of Tanavast. He's the only one in the series that is called the Son of Tanavast. Him and Dalinar get called the Son of Honor multiple times, but Kaladin is the Son of Tanavast. We don't know exactly what that means. It could literally be hereditary. We don't really know his mom's line, where her family comes from. We just know that one parent is a Light Eyes and one parent is a Dark Eyes, and they are of higher rank than Kaladin or his father. But we don't really know why the Stormfather calls him Son of Tanavast, and there's a lot of sources possible for that, but I personally think that it's a hint that he is likely to be the next holder for the Shard of Honor, which like I said in one of my previous videos. Another interesting thing that gets said about Kaladin that ties in with my theory of him picking up the Shard of Honor is Adolin specifically says to Kaladin, the Almighty used some of the same stuff that he put into Shard Blades when he made you. He says that in chapter 89 in Oathbringer. Feel free to go and check me, but Adolin says that to Kaladin. Now, I don't think Adolin has some mystical knowledge of anything, but I do think that Brandon uses words really intentionally, and that a character saying that about another character is significant, especially when we're talking about Kaladin, who already has some kind of connection to Tanavast that no other character has in the series. Brandon doesn't use words like that on accident. He's usually very intentional when he's putting these little hints into the books. Bear with me. And we know throughout Oathbringer, back to Kaladin's arc and where he's at with his mental health, we know throughout Oathbringer, Kaladin starts to have breakdowns. He sees what happens to Elhokar and then literally goes into battle shock and is unable to move. Adolin has to drag him out to safety because Kaladin completely freezes. He is struggling so much with his mental health in this book, and also figuring out whether this war is even worth it. He is trying to figure out, well, they're also just people, and they're people who are just trying to protect themselves and protect their families, and we're just people who are trying to protect ourselves and our families, and is this even really the right thing to do? And this struggle for Kaladin is tantamount because it affects his mental health more than any other character we see in the series. He's the one with the most sympathy for all the inhabitants of Roshar. And then we move into Rhythm of War, where Kaladin starts therapy. He invents therapy for Rashar, and he starts trying to help people while also helping himself, because it's group therapy, and he knows that he needs some mental health help. And so other people must too. So he starts therapy. He starts healing. He starts realizing that I can't do this all on my own, and that I can't just live for other people. And while he does throughout Rhythm of War do a lot of things to help other people, he's also realizing that he needs to find something else within himself worth living for. And by the end of it, he has his awakening moment right before he swears the fourth ideal. He has this vision of Tien, and he is able to heal, have like an epiphany moment where he can heal from a lot of the things that have happened. That doesn't mean that his healing journey is over. Mental health is not linear. There's no such thing as just being magically better, but there is such thing as having an epiphany moment where it becomes easier to overcome certain things that cause you to spiral into depression, because you're able to pull back on those moments. So all of this, before I get into Wind and Truth spoilers, all of this hints at a full cycle for Kaladin's story arc. He starts at depression. He gets worse. So let's say he starts at depression. He gets worse. Really terrible things happen. He's really struggling with the morality of this war. He has an epiphany moment. Maybe he'll come back down at the beginning of the next book. We don't know. But I do think that Kaladin has come out the other side from his suicidal ideation and realized that life is worth living. He doesn't just have to live for other people. He can live for himself and find good in life. And that the fact that he finally reached this moment, it would be full circle for him to end up having to sacrifice himself to save the rest of the world. It's a bummer. Don't get me wrong. I love Kaladin. I don't want to see the end of his storyline, but I think that that is almost the most poetic possibility for his storyline, is to have it come full circle. It started here, it went around here, and now it's going to come back here to him sacrificing himself. But instead of dying because he doesn't think life is worth living, he is likely to sacrifice himself because life is so worth living, but he's the only one who can get that job done. And I personally think it's going to be from picking up the Shard of Honor once it's reforged. Maybe that won't be his original intention, but like they think Dalinar is going to pick it up, but for some reason Kaladin has to step in and do it instead. All right, from this point forward, there are going to be spoilers for the preview chapters of Wind and Truth. I have only read through chapter 6, so possible spoilers up through chapter 6. I think these early chapters of Wind and Truth are completely proving my point. I have to be totally honest. Having Kaladin talk about how he can see the hope in each day, and he can see that the good days exist, and then him and Syl talking about how they'll get through this together, and that she will be here for him, and she will help remind him that these good days exist. They're both goners, to be totally honest. Every Kaladin POV chapter that I read is reaffirming more and more for me that his arc is over. He's spending time with his family. He's on good terms with his mom and his dad. He's playing with his little brother. He's seeing that his little brother deserves to have a future in a world, and Kaladin wants to partake in that without having to be a warrior and fight and get further PTSD. What better way for him to ensure the future of his little brother and everyone else on Rashar, the people that he cares about on both sides of this conflict, other than for him to pick up the Shard of Honor so that he knows that these people can be taken care of. It's going to take him away from this life that he's finally decided is worth living, and it's going to make him decide to step away from it and give it all up so that he can protect it. I also, this is a little bit less founded in fact, but I have a really scary feeling that the Honor Spren, like people argued in my Shard of Honor post, that maybe they will be sucked up when they're reforging the Shard of Honor. I'm really afraid that there's going to be this moment where they're in the middle of reforging the Shard of Honor and Syl starts getting sucked into it and Kaladin starts freaking out. No, we have to stop. We can't do this. And Syl says, no, it's okay, Kaladin. I want to do this. I want to protect you. Let me protect you this time. And then she gets sucked into the Shard of Honor with the rest of the Honor Spread. And then Kaladin says, you know what? I'm going to pick this up. For whatever reason, he feels that he has to do it. He picks up the shard. And what if he hears Syl's voice? What if she's with him after he picks up this shard? It would be so beautiful for Brandon to give that to Kaladin as like a send off and a goodbye. And we'll still get pieces of Kaladin as he is the shard holder, because the shard holders are going to be very important moving forward in the Cosmere. But I think that Kaladin is not going to make it out fully alive out of this first arc of Stormlight Archive. And y'all can feel free to try and poke holes in this in the comments, but I'm pretty set on this.